Before we get too much further into it, I want to tell you a little bit about my story and how I got to where I am and kind of what qualifies me to talk about life hacking and to write this course. Had you told me 5 years ago that today I would be a digital nomad traveling around the world using a tiger tail as a microphone to sing, I would have said you're completely crazy. But at the same time, I also would have been jealous or maybe just sad because that certainly would have been a dream of mine. So I started most recently as a nurse practitioner. I worked for about 4 years full time as a family nurse practitioner uh, in Tucson, Arizona at a community health center. I worked at a couple of different clinics there. Um, Absolutely loved my job. It was extremely excruciatingly stressful. I did start at around 110 hours per week as a new nurse practitioner, and that's quite normal. That improved to about 50 to 60 hours per week for the last year or so, but it was still highly stressful and um, just difficult. Here are my coworkers from my last couple of years at the LE Town Health Center in Tucson. We had a lovely, lovely clinic and lovely people. We really enjoyed working together. We had good morale. We had good relationships with our patients. We enjoyed coming to work. Even though I was just stressed out of my mind, I always knew that I was lucky for the people that I worked with and the things that I did. I enjoyed the responsibility. It was very stressful and very challenging, but I really enjoyed where I was and what I did. Unfortunately, after those 4 years, I started feeling pretty severely burned out. I still loved my job, but I was starting to care less and feel less patient. I was having less compassion for my patients. I was starting to get snippy in my personal life. Just the world and life seemed to have lost its flavor. Like I was just, things were just not that interesting anymore. And I knew that that was a really bad sign. So as soon as I started feeling that, I started looking for ways to feel better and starting to put some thought and feeling into my values and what do I need to do to make this better. I realized pretty quickly that needed to make a very big change. I had a lot of small changes in mind that I thought might help a little bit temporarily, but I knew that those changes would only help for months, not years. And so I realized pretty quickly that I needed to have a complete and total change of venue. So I sat down and started thinking about what do I love? What do I really yearn for? And number one was travel. I really, really wanted to travel more. And I had enough money to do so as a nurse practitioner, but it was so difficult to get the time off and to get far away like I wanted to. I didn't have any vacation time. When I would take vacations, I would come back to the clinic and it would be in shambles because it was a one provider clinic. I was the only one there. So when I was gone, they would have a different doctor or nurse practitioner there every day trying to take care of the patients. And it was not a good situation for me. And I felt very like I just had to be there all the time. I also knew that I loved languages, but again, I really struggled with the time factor as well as the energy factor. Also, being in the United States where English is the predominant language was difficult for me. In Tucson, we have lots of Spanish and Spanish speakers, and my job was maybe 50% to 65% in Spanish, so I definitely got plenty of practice speaking Spanish. But other than that, I really didn't have any time or energy to put toward learning new languages or about new cultures, which is what I really wanted. And as I thought about it more, between the travel and the languages, I realized I really wanted to immerse myself. But again, the time and the space were just not there. And so I started looking for ways that I could take action on that. So the first action that I took was to start looking at places that I wanted to go and decide that I wanted to go to Japan and that I wanted to learn Japanese. So 6 months before my go date, I started learning Japanese and spent about 2 or 3 hours a day learning Japanese. A couple of months into that, I started a small business so that I could start earning money online. These final 3 months before I left for Japan were three of the most intense months of my life, where I was studying Japanese approximately 3 hours a day and doing all the tasks to start my new business, create a website, write a book, create my online presence. And I still don't know how I made it through those 3 months intact. I will tell you what I did. I'll tell you the tips and tricks that I used to stay sane. But looking back on it, it just looks so impossible. But it happened. Then last year in April, I moved to Okinawa with the plan to travel for at least 1 year. I knew I needed to get away from patient care for a full year in order to allow my brain to relax and the burnout to relax. So that was the plan that I decided to put into action from there. So getting ready for that, I was studying Japanese 2 to 3 hours a day. I was preparing for the nomadic lifestyle. Other than creating the business, I was also reading and huge amounts, at least 2 hours a day, about how do people live their lives nomadically. Like I'm looking at how can you make a living, how can you just getting myself mentally ready for the leap. At the same time, I was also starting the business, and the main money making part of the business was that I wrote a book about surviving burnout. And that book was an incredible amount of work, but it was also something that I knew that was going to be very valuable for me. I knew that I had survived burnout for 10 years in healthcare and 4 years as a nurse practitioner, as long as I had without getting burned out. And I knew that writing down my thoughts and feelings about it were going to help me, as well as hopefully help some other people. So I moved to Okinawa. I spent 6 months there learning Japanese and language and culture, and really just allowing myself to rest. I worked on my business, but the burnout guide flopped. It turns out I did not have a passion to fix other people's burnout. I just wanted to feel better. Writing the burnout guide did actually help, despite the fact that I was working incredible numbers of hours. Having to write down my specific strategies that I had been using was very helpful to me to recognize what I was doing and how to continue to apply it in the future. Unfortunately, at that point, after the end of Okinawa, I ran out of money. So I came back to Tucson, started working as a nurse practitioner again at my old clinic a couple of days a week. Just about that same time, slightly before and then slightly after, I got 2 different online positions. I started working at both of them, and I was training both of those positions. I started them just about 3 weeks before I came back to work as a nurse practitioner, and maybe even just 2 weeks before I came back to work as a nurse practitioner. So I spent the pursuing 2 months training in 2 new positions, 2 online positions, which are positions that I can work from anywhere in the world, and also working as a nurse practitioner. First, it was 3 days a week. Then it was 2 days a week. Then it was 1.5 days a week. It was really quite a stressful time. The 2 online positions are I work as, and I currently hold both of these positions. I hold a adjunct faculty position at a graduate school teaching nurse practitioner students in their clinical, and I also work for a company that helps researchers to get participants into their research trials, and I thoroughly enjoy both of my positions. So after a couple of months back in Tucson, I launched again. I headed to Nicaragua, and after about a month, I went to Costa Rica. Everywhere I was going at this point, between Okinawa and back in Tucson and in Central America, people were asking me, how do you do it? And this time I had an income, but I had no savings. I had a couple of $100 in my savings account, and that was it. As a matter of fact, I think I was negative when I left and had to rely on my tax refund to get back in the black. So as soon as they would finish asking me how I do it, they wanted to know how they could do it. Usually not believing that such a thing was possible, that I was doing it, let alone that they could do it. And my answer was always, I don't know, because I didn't have a good handle on it. I just did it. And as a matter of fact, if you'd asked me 5 years ago how I could do such a thing, I would not have believed it either. So meanwhile, I'm working these jobs and um, and relaunching. I'm writing this entire time since I left for Japan. The first time I was writing about once a week on my personal blog, and people were way more interested in that than anything. I had a blog for my surviving burnout work, and it had a couple of people that followed it, but my personal blog was much, much more interesting to people. And I had a number of people tell me that I was much had a much more clear voice, and they had a much more enjoyable time reading my personal blog than anything I did professionally. So I started getting comfortable moving around the world. I went to Nicaragua and to Costa Rica. I had a couple of days back in the US, and then I headed off to Taiwan for 3 months, which is where I am now. So I spent this time learning about travel hacking and learning some languages and about cultures. Specifically, I've been in Taiwan for 3 months now and have spent that time learning some Mandarin language and lots about Taiwanese culture, and also making new friends and getting tons and tons of stuff done throughout this entire process. So again, I started getting a significant number of people asking me, no, really, how do you do it? And now that I was in Taiwan and feeling much more comfortable and confident, my income is more stable. I'm feeling comfortable. I've been at both of my jobs for a little over 6 months now, and I'm very happy with both of them. I figured it was time to stop shrugging my shoulders and figure out for myself exactly what it is that I'm doing. Similar to the Burnout Recovery Guide, so that once I decided that once I sat down and figured out for myself what it was that I was doing to hack my life like this, to create these amazing outcomes for myself, then I could apply it more systematically in the future. And also, I wanted to share that with others. I wanted to create something or make something that would convince the 5 year ago me that this was possible and that I could do it. And that is exactly how this course was born. I decided that in order to put those thoughts together and make some meaning out of it, I really needed to create something. So I decided to create this course. So the purpose of this is really, I went through a long, painful process to get here. And there was some pretty severe bumps on the road, and it was very difficult, but I'm here, and I'm really happy to be here. And for those of you who would like to get to where I am and do the kinds of things that I'm doing, I want to help you do that, and you should not have to go through that painful process. So the main pieces of the course, there's two main ideas of this course. There's two main tracks. The first track is the freedom mindset and a foundational mindfulness practice, something that you can rely on and do every day to create your dreams and believe in them. And then secondly, I want to help you gain knowledge of specific concrete actions, skills that you can learn, actions you can take that can help you hack your life and find your dreams. So let's go and get into the course.